Okay, so I'll begin the session. Thank you everyone for joining in. It is a fresh beginning to a series of faculty talks, which would have participation from faculty from AIIMS to begin with, and maybe we could open up to more people from other institutes as well. We intended to start these sessions as a measure of improving faculty-student interactions. And it was Dr. Pratap Sharan's brainchild that he came up with this idea that we could have a series of lectures that are somewhat like on the lines of TED Talks that we could have, but essentially talking on a variety of topics, both academic as well as non-academic, which are of common interest to participants, students, faculty, and allow us to delve into areas or domains that we not necessarily talk about in our interactions in an academic atmosphere. So without much ado, I would like to begin by thanking Professor Sharan and for taking this initiative and making us go forward with this. I thank the students who've been involved in getting this started, namely Arushi, Hardik, and Arshit, just to name a few, but there have been many people behind it. And I would really like to thank our inaugural speakers, Professor Piyush Sahni and Dr. Tony Jacob, who have graciously agreed to be the first speakers for these series of lectures. So without much ado, I would begin with requesting Professor Sahni to begin with his session. And I'm new to this system, so I am hoping that I'm recording this session, but I can't promise anything. Professor Sahni is obviously well known to all of you. He is professor and head of GI surgery at the Institute, and he's been a pioneer in many fields. And I would just request him to get started, and we would know more and we can discuss more as we go forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Aditi. Can you hear me? Can all of you hear me? I just want to be sure.
Yes, sir. You are very well audible, sir.
Okay, great. So I am not sure where to start and how to do this session, but what I will try and do is take you through when I first joined the All India Institute of Medical Sciences and see how far we can get in the 15 or 20 odd minutes that I have. So I joined the All India Institute on the 1st of August, 1976. So that's 40 plus years now. By the time I retire in 2023, November of 2023, I don't think I would have touched 50 years at AIIMS. When I joined in 1976, I was a 17-year-old, 18 years, or well, 17, doesn't matter. And I came from a school which all of you heard of, Delhi Public School, but at that time it had only two branches, Delhi Public School at Mathura Road, which was the original branch where I was from, and the R.K. Puram branch, which was an offshoot of the Mathura Road branch. I don't think I ever dreamt I would come to get into the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. I slogged like a donkey, I think, those few months before the entrance exams. That's what probably paid off. I was probably an average student right through my life, and I've remained average all my life. I have a capacity to work hard, and I can work hard, and that's what I probably did those few months, and that's what allowed me to get into the All India Institute. But when I joined in the All India Institute, I was a little taken aback. I was an average student, but here there were only toppers. In that batch of 50, there was not one person who hadn't topped one university, one exam, one board exam, or whatever. And very soon, I was in awe of all of these people. When I joined the institute, the All India Institute of Medical Sciences was much, much smaller place. There were no centers. The place where you see the Institute Rotary Cancer Hospital was actually a cricket ground. It was a field. There was no CN center. The RP center had an outpatient, and it had only the wing, which is the straight wing behind the OPD, not the cross wings. The cross wings were still not operational as yet. And there was no dental center, of course. There was no trauma center. The land was there, but there was no trauma center either. So when I joined the hostel very soon as an undergraduate, which was a little odd for somebody who lived in Delhi in those days. I was from Delhi, and about 15 of us were from Delhi, and we were the Delhiites. The Delhiites were a different group compared to the non-Delhiites because they all stayed in the hostel. And so they had a different level of bonding compared to us. But I joined the hostel very soon, close to my first mid-semester, and very quickly learned that if you had to get to the class from 8 to 9 in the morning, you better be either on time, early, before the professors started walking from their houses to the lecture theatres, or get to the class later after they'd all walked. Because if you walked in between them, then you were bound to be asked a question the next day or the day after. Beta, what were you doing last night? Why were you late to class? And this would not be the person who was taking the class, but somebody else, because they had seen you walk by. But it was a much smaller group of faculty, I think about 125 or so. Everybody knew everybody by their first names. And so you couldn't sort of hide in a group. Today you can. So that's what All India Institute was when I joined. We joined in 76 and the emergency was still on. So the Students' Union wasn't in existence, if I remember correctly. And something called the InstiFest, the festival of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, was held sometime later in 1977, I think, or maybe 78. What were the key things that happened at that time which are different today? It was a small group. You generally knew everybody, seniors as well as juniors. Ragging used to happen, but a very decent form of ragging. But in the process, you got to know people. You got to know your wingmates, and they were the most helpful in the rest of your 4.5 years, 5 years that you spent in those hospitals. So as undergraduates, we had a 5-day week in the first prof. So Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 were classes, not 8 in the morning. And Saturday was off and Sunday was off. So my batch, and I think the batch before us, were the people who said, why do we need so much time off? You came from school where you were slugging so much and suddenly you had a very relaxed time. So a time to get into a lot of bad habits. So if you could avoid them, it would be nice. And if you could get into doing a little more clinical work. So we were 1.5 years first professional, 1.5 years second professional, 1.5 years third professional. And so the suggestion came, why not do 1 year of a first professional and 2 years of a final professional so that you spend more time on the clinical side rather than on the basic science side. And that transition happened sometime later, soon after our batches. I'm not sure when exactly it happened, but I think it happened around 1980, 81, or maybe a little earlier, or maybe a little later. I'm not sure. I don't remember. As we went through our undergraduate course, we had a set of faculty guardians to whom we could walk up to at any point in time. As today, in those days as well, some faculty guardians were very warm, very affectionate, while others were a little aloof, as their own personality would be. So that was perfectly fine. But what tended to happen was that if you had a friend who had a very friendly, warm faculty guardian, more and more of us tended to gravitate to that faculty guardian's home for dinner. Not every day, but once in a few months, definitely. And definitely when they invited us over. So that was a very pleasant way of getting to know faculty members. And in the same way, you got to know the children of the faculty who are about your age, some doing medicine elsewhere and others in other professions. So it was a large family, but within that large family, there were also these inherent desires to try and improve our lot. So there was this strong impression amongst the undergraduates at that time that our system of entering into the postgraduate course needed to be more objective, less subjective. At that time, once you finished your undergrads and you finished your MBBS, you wanted to do a PG, all that you needed to do when I joined, not by the time I finished my MBBS, but at the time when I joined, our seniors, all that they had to do was 2 house jobs, maybe a few elective postings in a department that they were interested in, work hard during that time, impress the boss, and then there was an interview system which allowed the faculty to choose whom they wanted to take. And there was a feeling that the system was unfair. So as a result of a few agitations by the students, including some hunger strikes, and the favorite place to do a hunger strike was in the foyer of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences. So hostel के कमरों के गद्दे तकिए लाके चादरों के साथ वहाँ लेट जाया करते थे लोग, and they remained on hunger strike to get some of these things implemented. So the exam at the end of MBBS to get into the postgraduate course was something that happened in front of us. I think a batch or 2 senior to us is the first batch. I think 2 batches senior to us was the first batch which went through that. Probably Dr. Manoj Singh's batch was the first batch which had the MCQ exam and no interview. And the result of that was quite interesting. People who were expected to get medicine and pediatrics didn't get medicine and pediatrics. People who were not supposed to get anything got medicine and pediatrics. And that was vindication of people who felt that the system was not objective enough. There are pros and cons to every system. Today, I think we've gone the other way around and we're looking at MCQs and nothing else, and that's probably not a great idea either. But surely leaving everything to the whims and fancies of one health department is obviously not a great idea. Anyway, as we grew along in the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, we went through our postgraduate course. We saw various buildings come up. The Institute Rotary Cancer Hospital was to be, a foundation stone was to be laid, and again there was a strike. And this time the strike was to prevent the cricket ground from being taken over. I don't know how many of you know that on the West Campus, there was a football field that was given to the undergraduate students close to the trauma center. And this football field was in lieu of that cricket ground which the IRCH took away from us. We did have some agitations. We sat in on the cricket ground on a few days, but ultimately had to obviously give in. Another thing that I distinctly recall is the timing of the library increasing. It used to close, I think, at midnight, and then we wanted it to close at 2 a.m., and then there were some of us who wanted it open 24 hours. And there was a sit-in where Professor L.K. Bhutani, who was then head of Department of Dermatology and Venereology, who was also the professor in charge of the B.B. Dixit Library, said, no, 24 hours is not on, can't be done. We'll extend it till 2 o'clock. And we said no. And then there was a sit-in in the library. So all of us sat in the library through the night. And there was a huge crowd in the library. Usually, there weren't so many people in the library sitting and reading. But that day, there was a huge crowd. The library was almost full just because there was a sit-in. And so finally, we won and the library was open 24 hours. I don't know what the status is now and whether it matters anymore. Anyway, moved on from being an undergraduate to being a postgraduate. Very early on, was very impressed with surgery as a specialty. I also thought medicine was more of, using your mind. And because I thought I was an average student, I didn't think I had a very strong brain to, look at all permutations, combinations. So it's much better to do something where I could use my hands. And I thought I was decent with my hands. And that's why I decided I should go into one of the surgical specialties. I went on to do surgery. By the time I finished my surgery, I was in surgery unit 4, which at that time was Professor B.M.L. Kapoor and Professor Samaran Nandi. And by the time I was finishing my residency, Professor Samaran Nandi was looking to start a GI surgery department. I flunked my MS General Surgery exam, first attempt, so I cleared in the second attempt. It was a huge setback for me because I thought I couldn't flunk, but I did. It didn't make any damn difference to me. I still became a faculty member, not because I flunked the exam or I didn't flunk the exam. So if you have a setback, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't overcome it and go ahead and move forward. So people say you should take a setback as a stepping stone. I don't know whether I used it as a stepping stone, but fortunately for me, what happened was that the GI surgery unit came into being the month that I flunked my exam. And I got called by Dr. Nandi and I was asked, would you like to work at the GI surgery unit? You will get no salary. There is no paid position. There is no residency available. So if you wish to join. And I said, of course, I wish to join. Much better than sitting and moping around in the hospital, thinking of what had happened and how I'd flunked the exam. And interestingly, I worked for 5 months in the GI surgery unit, reappeared for my exams, got through, and was lucky to get a senior residency, which got me posted to the GI surgery unit of the Department of Surgery. The unit was still a part of the Department of Surgery. And this was the year 1985. 20th of May 1985, the GI surgery unit came into being. And from there, it moved slowly to become the GI Surgical Services. That was in 1988. And in 1989, it became a full-fledged Department of Gastrointestinal Surgery and Liver Transplantation. The name gastrointestinal surgery and liver transplantation, there's a story behind it, but maybe for another day. So for us who started setting up a department, one of the things that was a challenge, and I still remember Professor M.M. Kapoor, who was then the head of Unit 3, Surgery Unit 3, saying, it will take you 6 months to fill up your OT list. And initially, the department was not assigned an operation theatre, but we were loaned 8 beds by the Department of Gastroenterology and Human Nutrition. They used to have 8 beds for human nutrition in AB2 ward, and they loaned those 8 beds to the GI surgery unit to run the specialty. Primarily because gastroenterology would have a huge benefit if they had a surgical unit attached to them. And surgery unit 4 was the surgical unit which was doing most of the procedures for the Department of Gastroenterology. We started off from there and grew slowly and slowly. But I think one of the few things that we kept in mind, and these were largely things that Dr. Nandi sort of preached to us and taught us. And he would say that, if you want people to feel that you're good, you need to provide them a service. So because we were on the second floor, we started providing a service to all the departments which were on the second floor, which was gastroenterology as well as Department of Medicine. And the Department of Medicine used to call us and ask us for, can you do a cut down, please? They found it so much easier for us who were available on the second floor to come and do a cut down. From the cut down, we moved into putting in central lines and so on and so forth. So interestingly, over a period of time, we were not only doing GI surgical procedures, but we were also doing a little bit of intensive care, which surgeons were more comfortable doing compared to the medical specialties. The department then grew from one faculty member, no resident, to one faculty member and one resident. Ultimately, I did get paid for those 4.5, 5 months of working in GI surgery. At that time, an intern's stipend used to be 1,500 rupees, and I got paid 700 rupees a month, even though I finished my junior residency. So as junior resident, we used to get something like 2,100 rupees or 1,900 rupees or something. In 1991, I became a faculty member. When I became a faculty member, my first salary was 3,500 rupees. And I can share this with you. I have 2 children, and they were young at that time, and they were going to school. And in the month of February and March, me and my wife's salary together, my wife is a doctor, she's an anesthetist in the hospital today. Between the two of us, our salaries were not enough for us to pay the fees of the children and our income tax for that year. And every year for the first, I think, 5 or 7 years of our career as faculty, we continued to take loans from parents, so-called loans, which are non-repayable, to pay the fees of our children's school. And the children used to go to a school which was reasonably cheap. And so it wasn't a lot of money. So we've come a long way from where we were. And I think we've tried to, over the years, do a few things in the department. One, provide a good quality of service. We've always, so if we were asked to see a patient, we always tried to be prompt, and we continue to follow up the patient till such time as the patient was either operated upon by us or was discharged. So these were things that were unique to the department, and interesting times that we went through as residents and postgraduates till we became faculty members. I don't think I've said much, but we've spent almost 20 minutes plus. So I'll stop here and let Aditi take over and decide what we need to do now. Aditi?
Hello.
Yeah, Aditi.
Hi.
So I can continue to talk, but I thought it would be better to take some questions or have some comments, or maybe Tony does a talk or whatever, rather than I hog all the time.
Yeah. So I think there's one question from one of our ex-students. I think it's Vashisht. He's asking whether you had a pre-med year before you began.
Yes, we did have a pre-med year before we began. Interestingly, there were 2 institutions at that time. We used to have school till class 11 compared to the 10+2 system. Our system was 9+3, 8+3, 9th, 10th, and 11th. And at 11, you did a pre-med year. But there were 2 institutions, Christian Medical College, Vellore, and JIPMER Pondicherry, which took in students for the MBBS course from class 11. So except for those 2 institutions, everybody else had to do the pre-med year. I did my pre-med year in Dayal Singh College, which was the Gunda College of the university at that time. Every 3rd day there was a knifing incident in the arts and the commerce sections of the school, of the college. But the science guys we were supposed to be the serious guys. So we were shielded away from all this.
Okay, so we are also joined by one of my batchmates from college, 96 batch. That's Priyank. He's in the US and it's 2:30 a.m. right now there, or rather now close to 3 a.m. right now. So thank you, Priyank, for joining us. And he's very happy to hear about the history of the AIIMS and how students were very important part of the structure, or they were held important enough to be given a football ground and so and so forth. I mean, we have indeed played an important part in the history of AIIMS, have we?
Yeah, sure, we have. There's no doubt about that. So I think student involvement and student activism was something that was very strong during our times. Some of us used to get frustrated with the frequent disruptions to our usual routine. So our usual routine was come to the class, attend a few classes, go back in the afternoon, have lunch, sleep off, miss all the afternoon classes, then go off for a movie, play around somewhere, maybe sit in each other's rooms, or very often play cricket in the corridor of the hostel. Not outside the hostel, in the corridor of the hostel. Play cricket there. That was the fun time. So for a lot of us, if there was a strike, it meant you had to work. You had to make posters, you had to do narabaji, you had to go all around the campus. So that was too much work for a lot of us. So we were happier without some of the activism, or a little less level of activism. But a lot of us were very happy with that level of activism as well. We had some very interesting student leaders at that time, people who were ultra left of center in their thinking. There's still hats off to them, even today, believe in it and practice it. Some of them are very active in the political circles today, very active with the trade unions and the marginalized sections of society. And I think all of us are very proud that they still continue to believe in what they used to espouse then. It wasn't something which was meant to showcase to the world. It was something that they believed in strongly, and they practiced it right through their lives. So I have somebody asking a question here. How did your journey at JSS Bilaspur come along? So JSS was Yogesh and Raman were people whom I knew. They were juniors, colleagues, friends. And when they started off at Bilaspur, I used to very interestedly ask them about a few things. And for many years, they kept asking me to come over to Bilaspur, to Ganiyari, and spend some time there. For one or the other reasons, we couldn't go. Then 1 year, I decided that enough was enough, and we were going to go and spend some time with them. And I think since that year, we've gone, me and my wife both have gone and spent at least a week at Ganiyari with Yogesh, Raman and the rest of the team. And it's always been a very enlightening, invigorating, inspiring time that we spend. We spend that 1 week and we come back all charged up to do a lot of other things. Unfortunately, I make a lot of promises to them, and I come back and get dragged into my usual routine and can't fulfill a lot of what I've promised to them. But still, I keep trying to do whatever I can with them, for them, and in whatever way we can try and help them continue to do the great job that they're doing there.
Okay, so that's nice to hear. And maybe we'll hear about the JSS journey another day in another talk with more participants who have been involved with JSS. But there's another question here about ragging at AIIMS. So how has ragging evolved over the years? And you've been on both sides of the story, as a student, now as someone who is moderating the anti-ragging squad.
So, as far as ragging was concerned, ragging in the hostel, so day scholars versus hostelers. There was always people who stayed in the hostel from day one because in my time, because they had no other place to stay, and so they were always given the first preference to come in and stay in the hostel. The people who were from Delhi, it always used to take a little time for them to get to the hostel. One, because of the shortage at that time, too, of hostel rooms. And secondly, there was a little reluctance on the part of the people who lived in Delhi to come and stay in the hostel. Because in the first 2 or 3 weeks, you suddenly found that the people who were in the hostel were so pally with the seniors and the juniors that you tended to feel a little left out. At least I used to feel a little left out. And I wasn't part of the same group. So the ragging that went on in the hostel was at a different level from the ragging that went on for day scholars, because the day scholars were available only in the 9 to 5 time. And beyond 5 or 6, if you didn't let them go off, then there could be an issue. There could be a phone call from somebody's house to one of the seniors, to the hostel superintendent, and so on and so forth. And therefore, the hostelers were more amenable to the ragging. The ragging used to be more of it wasn't very physical. It was more verbal, more mentally challenging, and people used to get upset, and people used to enjoy it. So there were all kinds of people, and that happens today, and used to happen then as well. I think now we've got little choice. At some point in time, what happened was that the ragging took an ugly turn in a lot of institutions. And now, obviously, there's little choice but to follow the law of the land. There's little we can do about it. So there is no question of ragging or, within quotes, an introduction happening. You get away with it, it's a different matter. But if you get caught, then the penalties are fairly serious. So you don't want to spoil your career doing that.
Okay. I think in the interest of time, we will close the discussion here for the moment. And we would want to hear from Tony now. Tony Jacob is Associate Professor in the Department of Anatomy. And Dr. Sahni, we would request you to please stay on, because if we have time, we would want to discuss more of what the remaining questions are here on the chat.
Sure, I will stay on.
So
I'll try Tony as a host.
No, I can do it. I think I can share the screen. Not a problem. Great. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
So first and foremost, thanks a lot for this opportunity. I think Dr. Sharan and Aditi and the students, they thought that I could actually talk about something. So then after hearing what Dr. Piyush went through, I mean, their entire journey through AIIMS, I thought I would tell a little bit about my journey and the choices that I made and why I am who I am. So very often what we come across is that a lot of bashing of the education system in India, that there's too much to learn for the students, particularly in the school. There's very little practical output to what we learn in school. It's just to create, obedient babujis to work as IAS officers, what the Macaulayan system was supposed to be. And the end result is often just a numerical certificate, wherein you get a certain number of marks, and that particular grade or mark is what eventually determines your opportunities and your choices, right? And so the entire focus is on examination system, and most of you have also come through that entire examination system. But my question is that all? Is that all that your life is going to be about? Your performance and eventually a number? This is something that I strongly believe in, that at the end of the day, you're going to become a doctor. For me, I don't practice medicine today, but as a teacher, or even as a doctor, or if you go and visit a doctor, how many of you actually examine or have ever seen a certificate of their first professional marks or their final professional exam results or their AIMS entrance rank or anything of that nature? You never do, right? At the end of the day, when you go to a doctor, you're looking for a person who will be able to solve a problem for you. And for me, that learning of problem solving skills actually never starts at medical school. It's something that has started much before. And that is why, like if you go through school and actually learn things as they're meant to be, you may actually get a lot out of it. For example, we learned Sanskrit. We had Sanskrit in school till class 8. And there are 2 shloks that I've always been very, very particular about. And they've been kind of guiding principles for me. And they're this one. Namanti falno vriksha, namanti gunino jana, shushka vrikshasha murkhasha na namanti kadachana. What does that mean? It means about humility. Whatever position that you reach, if you're not humble, it's very unlikely that you're going to have the kind of effect that you would expect to have. Another one is about education and learning. And this is something that I've held very close to myself. Vyayato vriddhi mayati, shaya mayati sanchaya. That means the more you spread what you have, it actually increases. And the more you try to keep it to yourself, it actually depreciates. And this is something that I practice in school as well. So this is during that time we used to have landlines, and very often during the homework time, a lot of people would call up, ask questions for explanations or how to do a particular homework. And I'm sure a whole lot of you have also gone through that, probably more through WhatsApp chats as well as other media. But for us, it was essentially the landline. And Dad, if he was around, he would be like screaming, "Why are you hogging on the telephone?" and so on. And at the end of the day, I realized that I actually did not have any time for any tuitions in school. There's so much to do. There was so many extracurricular activities. There was quizzing, there was a dramatic society, there were literary societies, debates, elocution, name it. There were so many things to do. And that has actually become the person that I am. So even in 11th and 12th, did not have to go to coaching because there's so much to learn even from the books that you use. So at that time, we used to use Resnick and Halliday as well as Sears and Zemansky for physics. There was MBB Roberts for biology and Morrison and Boyd for organic chemistry and Castellan for physical chemistry. So these were books that we used. And these were go-tos apart from the NCERT books. So at the end of the day, what do you realize? What I've realized is that this actually helped me quite a lot, especially when I'm working in the lab today. And I understand that a lot of my students actually don't understand the concept of buffers. And this is something that you learned in school. How to make a buffer and what is the principle on which buffers work. Something as simple as the law of mass action. And the application of that is something as simple as the question that used to come in school. How do you reduce the sourness of something? By adding salt. Where did that come from? The law of mass action. So the same principle applies when working in a lab to make a buffer. So if you actually understand principles, a lot of problems get solved. And when you're involved in multiple activities, either in school or in college, what you learn are also management skills. A lot of management skills, people management skills, resource management skills, and also senior management skills. Very often, you also need to manage your seniors and how to work around their specific idiosyncrasies or their specific ideas. And they can be difficult. They can actually be difficult if you don't know how to get around. So you actually learn a lot of people management skills by participating in a lot of activities. And this kind of problem solving and this acute involvement in what I was studying helped me get the gold medal in my medicine final year. And that case was a very straightforward 15-year-old boy with a superior mediastinal tumor, which you could diagnose with the classical dilated veins in the distribution of the superior vena cava, the discoloration of the upper limbs as well as the head and neck, the classical. But apart from that, this kid also had hepatomegaly. And there was a cardiomegaly, there was a displaced apex, and there was pedal edema as well. So I did not stop over there. And I asked a little further. Why? Because I noticed that this kid also had clubbing. Now, clubbing is something that you associate very often with a chronic hypoxic disorder, right? So when I started questioning the kid, he had a history of regular cough with expectoration, repeated regular pulmonary infections since he was a kid. And there was this evidence of stunted growth in height and weight compared to what his parents' height and weight were. Luckily, his father was there with him during the exam as a bystander. And the only tool that I had at that time to check what I suspected was percussion. And percussion is something that we used to practice day in and day out. So even when you're sitting, you just do this to check what is the difference between a resonance, a lung resonance, and do that on a muscle group like the deltoid or the thigh muscles to check what is dullness and anything in between. And using that abdominal percussion as well as the percussion of the entire chest, I finally realized that this person has got a situs inversus. The liver was on the left side. I could make out the trough space on the right side. And the cardiac apex was also kind of shifted more towards the midline. And so I actually made a diagnosis of a superior mediastinal tumor. But in addition to that, the primary diagnosis that I made was a Cartagena syndrome with a situs inversus and chronic lung infections leading to the clubbing and everything else. It just so happened that the kid also had a superior mediastinal tumor. So medicine is something that is absolutely fascinating. It's like solving a mystery. And this is something that we also did a lot of extracurricular activities while we were undergraduates as well. There was so much to do. And this is what I was talking to one of my undergraduate students a few days ago, that I learned a lot about Carnatic music as well as about cinema during my undergraduate days. So we had movie clubs which used to show films of Akira Kurosawa, Kieślowski, Satyajit Ray, Shankar Brothers, the whole spectrum of art cinema, the noir movement, the French cinema, Godard, all of them I was actually exposed to during my undergraduate days. There was so much to do. And as usual, life went on. I saw what Vashisht had written as a comment to Dr. Sani as to whether there can be an active internship. And believe me, if you are interested, you can actually do an active internship. You can operate. You can do a lot of minor procedures. You can do n number of things. The number of deliveries that we used to take in the labor room posting, starting from the third year labor room posting, was phenomenal. And the experience that you get in the labor room or in the OT or in the wards is something that cannot be seconded by just learning online. And strangely, because of my interest in languages, this was also the time when I actually used to explore learning languages, learning accents. And the patients used to find it absolutely fascinating when I used to be able to talk to them, A, in their accent, and B, find out and tell them, oh, you've come from this particular place. So immediately that helped to break a lot of ice with patients. Why? Because A, the moment they see the medical student, they would be, oh God, ek aur aa gaya. Isse bhi question sunna hai. Iske bhi pure interview sunna hai. Ye kab khatam karenge? But the moment you create a rapport with some common points, you're able to communicate with them, it actually becomes a pleasure to take history, to learn a lot about people. And the more you learn about people, the more you're able to factor that in to your management protocol. Something that I always talk about, even during the classes, that, okay, you've got somebody coming who is a rickshaw puller, who's got a pneumonia. You would not think about giving that person an antibiotic that he would have to take 3 or 4 times a day. Why? Because the only time that the person can actually take a medicine would be either early in the morning and late at night when he comes back home. So these are things that you can only figure out if you talk more to your patients, you communicate with them, you make eye contact with them, you learn their language, you try to speak to them in their dialect. And that breaks a lot of ice and that helps you to learn medicine a lot. And as usual, I did not go for any coaching for the post-graduation course. And the first time that I got or wrote the entrance, I picked up anatomy. And this was my thesis topic, the surgical and developmental anatomy of the ethmoid bone. And that finished. I built a reputation for myself in anatomy. And I thought that, okay, now this is time to move on. And that's when I joined for my SRship at AIIMS in 2007. And I started interacting with a lot of the undergraduate students at AIIMS. And I realized the amount of opportunities that we can have at this institution. Went on to do my PhD and finally joined as a faculty here. And during the PhD, one thing that actually helped me a lot was just plain observation. Just plain observation. And this is one of the observations that I actually had. That when we look at the pancreas, this is the classical pancreas where you get the typical bipolar staining because of the rough endoplasmic reticulum near the basal aspect of the acinar cell and the zymogen granules towards the luminal aspect. So I was working with animal models of pancreatitis for my PhD. And the moment I looked at it under the microscope, what I saw was this, that the bipolar staining is there. But apart from this normally uniform staining for the rough endoplasmic reticulum, what I was seeing were these large granules. And we tried to solve this mystery by many ways. We tried all kinds of staining techniques in this as to find out what exactly that was. And eventually, when we took it to the electron microscope, what we saw was completely deranged endoplasmic reticulum. And that's how the entire story started changing. The story of what I was looking at completely changed from just an inflammatory disorder to working with autophagy, with working with cell stress, ER stress, and cell death. So this is what I work with. And my model is pancreatitis in rodents. And this is my area of interest. But apart from that, I've also got a great interest in history as well as literature. And so I do that as side business. And this is one of the processes that has come out of it. So what has actually helped me is to understand and probe any situation around me. And what helps in probing are only 5 tools of logic. Who, what, when, where, and how. If you can answer these questions related to any situation, you can very often find answers. And if not, what is readily available in your memory, Google is always there. Google Baba, I keep on telling, always knows more, but you would have to use him judiciously or her judiciously to find out what you actually want. So the skills that I learned during my school days in language, as well as during my college days, has helped me with reviewing, in communication skills, as well as something that is very important in communication, and that is observation. And this is something that every doctor must learn. Observation. See what effect your patient has, or your colleagues have, or your seniors have, and think about it, process it. What could be the ramifications of this? And reflect over it. And that itself becomes a learning process to understand people, understand situations, understand research, understand your students, understand your teachers, understand any situation. And this is something that I strongly believe has actually helped me quite a lot. So, in summary, what I would like to say is that we all have choices. You can never come across a situation where you say that, no, I did not have a choice. You always have a choice. And at the end of the day, it is your choices that will determine what you do, when you do it, and where you do it. And something that is extremely important over here is to remember that as an adult, to take responsibility for the choice is what is most important. You can't keep blaming throughout your life that, I did this because this person told me, or I did this because my parents asked me to do it, or I took this subject because my professor told me to take it. You can't keep doing that all your life. At some point in time, you've got to become an adult and take responsibility for it. And I think that the journey that I've had is entirely dependent on all the choices that I've made. It's something that is never complete. The journey or the learning, it just keeps on continuing. And there's a reason why it continues is because you never stop learning. And as a doctor, I would always hope that you actually never stop learning. That is what I would like to tell you. And that has been my journey, my story. And I don't know how you take it. Let's see. Do you have questions? Or Aditi, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony. I think people have questions. And to begin with, a question from me to you and also some other participants is, what made you choose anatomy as your choice of specialty?
Funnily, I could not possibly be bothered to study for an entrance exam. And with my rank in the All India PG entrance, that was what I was getting among the institutions that I would have liked to work in. And initially, I had thought that, I would write the PLAB exams and go do surgery fellowships in UK or something like that. Then I said, no, I don't want to do this. This is something that I want to continue with. I keep telling a lot of people that probably this is entrenchment, where you become happy in what you've chosen and you stay there as it is. But then I realized that my primary passion was not actually clinical medicine. It was actually teaching. It was communication. And anatomy provided me that opportunity. So within 6 months of having joined anatomy, I knew that this is the right choice. And after that, there's been no looking back.
Great. That's nice to hear. So Vishwesh had a question about whether you got any research exposure during your undergraduate years.
None whatsoever. None whatsoever. So that was a classical government medical college where you have a lot of cases. There was one person who used to do some research. He was a professor of pathology, Professor K.P. Arvindan, who we had heard of, was a scientist as well as a pathologist. But other than that, we as undergraduates were hardly ever exposed to anything like research. There would be a lot of other things to do. There would be a lot of cases to see. We would have evening classes with faculty, and we used to even go, especially during medicine and surgery postings, we would always go in the evening to the emergency, because the number of cases that we would get to see in the evening during the emergency and the stuff that you could do during the emergency were like phenomenal. The number of snake bites. And the funniest were when people used to come with the snake. And there was this time, and I was on duty as an intern. This person comes with a snake, and we all thought that the snake in the bucket was dead. But as soon as the person opened the bucket, the snake came out, and there was absolute mayhem in the entire casualty. And finally, the snake was caught, it was killed. It was a cobra. And then eventually we started the anti-venom and all that. The snake bite used to be a separate posting. We had a 2-week posting for snake bite in the snake bite unit in Kerala with every internship. So medicine snake bite posting 2 weeks was mandatory. And it used to be really, really interesting.
Okay, can you read the next question? I mean, that's more of a comment to you, and commending you for the way you held the extempore event and the review competition. So once again, probably they want to know where precisely in Kerala did you do your undergraduation?
Kozhikode, which used to be called as Calicut, where Vasco da Gama had landed.
Okay, and as you can make out, there's another comment about the content of your slides being in red and blue. Any special reasons for that choice of colors?
Okay, red and blue, I have my boss to thank. And I think that is something very common among the GI group. Dr. Piyush Sahni will bear me out, I think. This is something that my co-supervisor for my PhD, Professor Pramod Garg, from whom I've learned so much, he uses this theme of red and blue. And I've seen Dr. Piyush's slides also, this red and blue as a very common thing. I've seen him use red and black as well. But somehow I like this red and blue, and I think that gives a very good contrast and it's quite visible. So I've got Dr. Pramod Garg to thank for the red and blue.
Or maybe it's just got to do with the artery and the vein colors, right?
No, not at all. Not at all. It is just the contrast that it shows up on a PowerPoint presentation on a white background. And I think I've always seen Dr. PKG, that is Pramod Garg, have this contrast. Dr. Sahni?
Yeah.
Am I right? The GI group is particularly fond of red and blue, I think.
I think the next comment, I would request both you as well as Professor Sahni to try to address. Do you think MBBS nowadays strips off the scientific temper students have during their initial years? So first Tony, and then we'll go back to Dr. Sahni.
Bhavik, does MBBS strip off your scientific temper? I don't think so. As a matter of fact, a lot of my scientific temper has been honed because of my MBBS. And this is something that I tell not only my students as well as a lot of the MD students as well. Your MBBS has actually given you tools which help you understand a lot about human disease, which a basic scientist very often does not get to understand or see. Or they do not have that perspective. Something as simple as I am working with pancreatitis, especially when people talk about treatments and an end-all medicine for pancreatitis. As a clinician, one would understand that most of the cases that come as pancreatitis to the clinics are usually in a state where the only thing that can probably help them is supportive care. So doing basic research as to why pancreatitis happens may not be the answer than controlling the storm, the cytokine storm that happens because of the disease spreading to multiple other organs because of that. And this cytokine storm is also something that currently most of you would have been hearing happens during the COVID-19 infection, severe respiratory infection. And that is apparently what is causing more of the problem than the lung damage per se. So if you ask me, if you go beyond the marks that you should be getting in your professional exam and actually study the subject during your MBBS, you'll find it is actually quite fascinating. It's actually quite fascinating, and it will allow you to question. It will allow you to think. It will allow you to program your brain into algorithms to find out multiple things that can be happening simultaneously and eventually find a solution. And I do not mean just a diagnosis. I'm talking about a solution. We are not always diagnosis oriented. Sometimes a diagnosis may not even help. Sometimes what is important is to find a solution to what the problem is coming across. Sir.
Hello, Dr. Sahni? Would we have your...
Sorry, Aditi, I lost you. Tony, did you get what Aditi said?
Sir, she was asking about your comments regarding Bhavik had asked a question. If you can see that, do you think MBBS nowadays strips off the scientific temper students have during the initial days?
You know, so somebody else had asked me this question. I hadn't replied to it, but what you get yourself to do is not necessarily what your curriculum tells you to do.
I agree.
So when we were undergrads, we used to have a summer fellowship for undergraduate students. A lot of students who lived in Delhi could avail of those because those who came from outside the city wanted to go home. While those who were in the city were happy to keep coming to the institute, to departments and continue to do some fellowship, which is essentially exposure to research. Dr. Sushila in anatomy used to have people, Dr. M.C. Vaidya in anatomy used to have people who used to go and work with them. Dr. Narang in biochemistry, Dr. Indranath in biochemistry, these were people whom people used to go and work with. So, you know, but still there were a limited number of fellowships available and you had to make the effort to go and do those fellowships. So I wanted to do surgeries. I did during my internship when I was posted to surgery. You can go back and ask my senior residents. I lived and did nothing else except breathe surgery. So if I had time on my hands, I would go to the library and read a book on surgical handicraft. I didn't have surgical handicraft.
Awesome book.
And people today say, "Meri face shield goggle jo hai fog ho rahi hai." So I keep telling them, apply a film of soap on it and it will be okay. Because Pi Surgical Handicraft in 1982 told me that.
I learned bandaging from there.
So you know what you do. So as an intern, I did an elective posting in surgery. I did not get my surgery at the first attempt. So it was the second attempt I got it. So 6 months I did a house job. I did the house job in surgery. So by the time I joined my PG, I had effectively done 7 months of surgery. So I was a step ahead of the person who was joining afresh, who was not less capable than me. Even today, he's more capable than me. But, you know, I had a step ahead of him because of that effort. So no system defines for everyone what they should do. And you will need to make that effort to get into what you feel interested in. I think the opportunity at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences are tremendous. You have to find the opportunities and you have to make use of the opportunities. Sometimes you will go looking for an opportunity to a faculty member. The first response may be a little dull. But if you persist, even the most hardened faculty will melt and do what you want them to do for you. So I don't think no curriculum can take into account the needs or wants of 100 people. So you have to make the effort. So if you want to learn surgery, you have to make the effort. You have to tell Mohit, teach me. You have to go running after him and say, teach me. And he doesn't teach you, tell him, teach me. And if he still doesn't teach you, you tell him, teach me. Otherwise, I will keep coming back to you. and they will have no choice but to teach you. Persist, persist, and persist.
Yes.
I think with Mohit, it would be the other way around.
Yeah, sure, it will be, I'm sure. But, I'm just giving you an example. Even if you come to me on a day and say, sir, ye karna hai, to I will say, acha, theek hai, kal aana, parso aana. Aaj time nahi hai. Because we all have much more to do than we can do within the 24 hours we have. But if you persist 2 or 3 times, anybody and everybody will try and help you in whatever manner they can.
Yeah. So I'll take another question from Bhavik. Bhavik asks us, do you think being separated or associated with clinics hampers or facilitates your scientific endeavors?
Tony, that's for you.
Sir, for you.
Okay.
Is associated with clinics, the other is not, both of you.
So I don't think it either assists you or hampers you. It all depends on what your mindset is. So if you want to do clinical research or clinical science, then the clinic helps you. But even if you're not sitting in the clinic, even if you're not seeing a patient, your interaction with clinical colleagues will still give you enough insight into what is happening there. So you don't necessarily need to be sitting in front of a patient to be able to do clinical science or clinical research. So your scientific endeavors shouldn't be affected in any manner by whether or not you're interacting with the patient. It all depends on how you want to interact. There is this new term that people like to use, clinical scientist, a clinician scientist. So you do your clinics and you do your science.
I would like to take that a little further. So one of the things where a lot of research questions in clinics usually comes from is from daily observations. So you see a pattern that, okay, so that is something that I miss out, which is why I completely focus nowadays on basic sciences, where the questions have come from the clinics. For example, I work with Dr. T.S. Roy, where we look at the aging as well as the development of the auditory system. So over there, our main research question rests on a phenomenon that is very commonly observed around us, and that is presbycusis. That means as we grow older, one starts hearing less acutely than what we did when we were younger. And similarly for pancreatitis, the reason why I picked this up with Dr. Pramod Garg was because this is something that really affects people. They come in a severe condition very often to the clinics. So that is something that I do miss, observing things that happen on a daily basis, common symptoms that happen, and trying to find an explanation for that. So that is something that I do miss from the clinics. But otherwise, if you just look around you or see the material that you have, once I've become a faculty or once I've done my PhD, I know this is my research interest. This is what I want to go into. So there are always questions that keep coming up from what my students have done. So I don't have any dearth of questions, but that doesn't mean that I don't miss the clinics. There are times when I do miss the clinic. For that, my family more than supplements. But everything, I'm the on-call. This has happened. Should we do this? And I'm supposed to be the prognostician, particularly the doctor of death. So I usually predict that, okay, how much time does this person have remaining? And unfortunately, I'm usually dot on right. So that happened with my granddad as well. So I was still a final year medical student, and it was an Easter for which I had gone to visit him to my ancestral home in Thrissur. And he had all signs of left ventricular failure, which was chronically induced anyway. And he did not want hospitalization or anything. So I'd actually called up my dad. And while wishing him for Easter, I told him that if you want to see your dad alive, that is my granddad alive, please come to Kerala within a week. And I kid you not, he had booked his ticket for Saturday. And my grandfather passed away on Sunday. So yes, prognostication is also an art, which I've learned during medicine, and that cannot be done without observation. And that is something that I do miss in the clinics. Yes, Aditi.
That's hard, I guess. Yeah, but I think I have a different stand. I think for many of us clinicians, the ideas for research do come up from our clinics, from our patients, and we do have very relevant questions to address all the time and not enough time to do the research to address them. That's what my take is on the topic. But over to the next question, and I think this has been asked twice. So Dr. Sahni, they would like to understand why you chose to be a faculty over a private practice in Delhi. And there's also obviously comments associated with how difficult it must have been to carry on in almost penury when you just started out.
So I think when I started off, I didn't think that I won't have enough money to pay my children's fees. If I knew that, I probably would have thought of something else as well. But to be very honest, even today, people have asked me if I would like to come and join them in practice. I just don't find it easy to do. Just the thought of somebody who's sick, asking him to make a payment to me is something that I just can't stomach it. I just find it difficult. So I'm made that way. I don't think I can take money from a person who comes to me and says, I'm ill, and I say, oh, this is my profession, so you pay me for this. So I find that very uncomfortable concept. And I think I just decided that it's much easier to work in a government setup where I don't have to, where I can treat a person without asking him to pay money to me. He may need to buy medicines, which is possible I'll try and provide, but if I don't and I can't have them and I can't provide them, that's very little I can do about it. But at least it doesn't have to be me. So you could say that I'm getting a salary, and the salary is coming from taxpayers' money. So in some ways, I'm still being paid for the service that I'm providing. But it's not from an individual. It's not from a person who's sick who's coming and giving me the money. So as a concept, taking money from a person who's ill was something that I just could not think of. So that's the reason I continue as a faculty member, and I joined, I thought I'd work only in the government sector, never in the private sector.
Okay, so we have about 9 minutes and 3 questions that I would like.
Aditi, you muted yourself. We can't hear you.
Sorry. So we have just about 9 minutes left, and we'll take on one question now. What drives you and what keeps you interested? What would be the right way for them to stay interested in the field? Dr. Sahni?
So I think you do what you like and you will stay interested. If you do something that you don't like, you will not stay interested. So it's possible that you may have to do 10 things and 3 of them you like and 7 of those you're forced to do. But there must be something that you like to do. If you don't do something that you like to do, then it's unlikely that you'll stay interested. So that's my short answer to that question.
So, Tony,
I agree with what Dr. Sahni says. And that is another reason why I was hoping that I get selected as faculty at AIIMS, because here I get paid for doing what I like to do. That is, I like research, I like to talk, I like to write, I like to do, I get to do everything and I get paid for it too. And I get paid quite well. Paid enough to listen to you. But yeah, apart from that, Aditi, I would like to answer this question that Lovedeep has raised about reading.
Go ahead. Yeah.
There are 4 books that I would recommend that every undergraduate student should have read. 2 of them, even Dr. Rajiv, who's your associate dean, recommends. And that is, one is Atlas Shrugged and Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. The other 2 books are my own personal favorites, and they have helped me in my journey as a doctor as well as a researcher. And One of them is A.J. Cronin's The Citadel, and the other is Axel Munthes' The Story of Saint Michel. Both of them are stories of doctors and what they did in their practice, how they went about their practice. And the Story of Saint Michel is actually based out of an island off the shores of Italy. And A.J. Cronin's is about his starting off his practice as a doctor, the kind of problems that he went through. So they would actually they're really old books. They've been written during an era where you may not be able to identify with them. But I think they're classics that everybody should read. I do understand that nowadays in the hostel, one of the commonest themes among people who actually read voraciously is nihilism. Nietzsche seems to be a favorite author. It's not that I've not read Nietzsche, but I think that at your age, an Ayn Rand or an A.J. Cronin would give you better perspective than Nietzsche. And another person had asked as to whether extracurricular activity or co-curricular activities would help you. Believe me, what I am today and the ability that I have to speak to you and communicate with you are things that I've actually started learning in school. I'm an extremely introverted person who wouldn't talk very easily. And now it seems that it's difficult to stop me from speaking. So those are skills that you actually develop as you go along, and especially with a lot of extracurricular activities. It gives you confidence. And something that is extremely important in the persona of a doctor is confidence. Like, ye banda kuch kar paega. I think that is extremely important. Yeah.
That's good to hear. But in the interest of time, I'd just like to take one more question, and this one's from Priyank. What is your opinion if medical education system should also have emphasis on healthcare system and social determinants of health and health advocacy?
Sir?
And Dr. Sahni, sir?
I think extremely important. I think we as a profession over the years have become more business oriented. Somehow the focus has shifted from where the profession was supposed to be to where it has come. And therefore, at the undergraduate level, these are extremely important. Understanding healthcare systems, the need for healthcare systems, and understanding the social determinants of health are extremely important. Not only this, I think advocating for what should be the approach to healthcare in a country is something that only we can do. Nobody else understands healthcare as well as we do. And if we don't expose the undergraduate to these issues at the level of the undergraduate curriculum, they will never be familiar with these issues. Fortunately for us, even though our curriculum did not have it, we had a lot of people who were interested in or had views which were left of center, which were the in thing in those days. And therefore, we got exposed to it in a number of manners. If the curriculum cannot have space for this, then institutions such as ours must create space for these within the frameworks of the curriculum, or just outside of at the periphery of the curriculum. By way of saying, by at the periphery of the curriculum, by getting experts on the subjects to come and talk to undergraduates about it. We can't fit it into our curriculum per se.
I agree with sir. And I think as a doctor, it was extremely important to be socially conscious, because if you're not socially conscious, and this is something that I've observed quite often at AIIMS, is that today, more than clinical medicine, we get a lot of investigative medicine, and that is actually business oriented. Whereas you can reduce a lot of expenses and a lot of incidentals for your patients if one actually practices clinical medicine. And there, something that is going to be vetting the way that you look at a situation is going to be your social consciousness. And that social consciousness cannot come just by the way. you would have to interact with patients, you would have to read about these situations, you would have to be aware of such situations. And if you just remain in that frog in the well kind of a situation, ki haan, mujhe to bas clinical medicine hi padhna hai, then this kind of a wholesome learning will never happen. And if we are not able to provide it as faculty, then probably we can always rope in faculty from other institutions to provide that perspective.
Aditi, can I say a sentence?
Pratap, go ahead. I think Aditi's muted her mic.
Okay. The new curriculum will have social consciousness as well as social determinants at the center of the curriculum itself. This is what I wanted to mention.
Yeah, that's an extremely important thing to do.
Okay, so I think it's about time that we...
Aditi, you muted yourself again.
I'm sorry. I don't know this happens on its own by mistake. So I think we need to wrap up today's session, and I would like to really thank our speakers, Dr. Sani and Dr. Tony, for coming in at short notice to be here. But would it be possible for us to request your presence again at about the same time next Sunday for the start of our next session so that we can take up the remainder of the questions? Do you think you could fit that in?
Sure.
At about 11:30 Sunday?
Yeah,
sure.
We're still locked in.
Sure.
All right. So we'll be back at 11:30 next Sunday, and we would inform the group about the chosen speakers for the next session. But at 11:30 to 12, we would love to have you two back for more discussion on the questions that had come up from your talk and any afterthoughts that the participants might have. And thank you very much, everybody, for being part of this. And thank you, Dr. Sharan, for bringing this about. Thank you, students, Hardik, Arshit, Rishi, and all of you who chipped in to make this happen. Once again, thank our speakers, and we see you again next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Aditi.
Bye.
You can go to